Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. In a video, doing some watercoloring on a very large floral. One of my favorite things. Altenew just released this new ceramic palette. It's called the Petal Palette. I will unbox it and show me putting the little bits of watercolor and whatnot in it on screen once I get started. And yeah, we're doing a hop to celebrate it. I will have that info. It's on Instagram, so my Instagram will be linked directly below. Worth checking out because there'll be tons of inspiration. I've already done a couple videos using Altenew's tube watercolors. I will link those in the end screen if you want to check them out. And yeah, just played more with those. Watercolored one of Altenew's very large florals like I love to do. Splatter, some stenciling, simple ink blending, all the fun things. As always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It is what helps pay the bills, keeps the channel going, etc. And yeah, that's it for the housekeeping. Let's get into making the card. So here is the Petal Palette from Altenew. It comes all boxed up, very well protected. The box is enormous, just heads up on that. The palette itself is not huge. It's got the measurements and everything. It says like it's 8 by 9 inches roughly, and it's a petal shape, hence called a petal palette. Yeah, the box is deceptive. I was like, when I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, where am I going to put this thing? And then when I actually pulled it out, I was like, oh, okay, this is manageable. And yeah, it's pretty. It's pretty. I like it. You know, you guys have been seeing me use my little literal piece of plastic as a palette for forever. I do have actual like enamel coated tin ones, and they're enamel coated. They're buried under 5 million other things. So yeah, this is nice. Honestly, it's kind of bougie. So I decided to just get right into it and stick some watercolor. Now, I put these Altenew watercolors. It's a like set of all these colors. I have a few that I had purchased previously that I talked about in the beginning that I'll have those videos linked in the end screen. But yeah, I just took these colors here and just applied like a small amount to this palette. I'm not filling this in the sense of like I have other, because I have a ton of watercolor stuff. I have like, you know, the big palettes with lids where you fill those wells. With one like this, I wouldn't do that. Because I know I'm gonna like change my mind or want different colors. I see this as more like only putting in enough to use for like a few times, and then I'll probably like wash the thing off when, you know, everything becomes a muddied mess, and then just kind of rinse and repeat. But because this isn't the type of palette like with a lid, yeah, I'm not squeezing out much. But what little I did squeeze out, this is enough to do, especially for card makers. Now, if you're doing like full on, you know, watercolor landscapes, big things, even what I've got here is probably enough, but it all kind of depends on the person. So I drug out the colors that I put in here with my brush just so it shows up a little more, because the thing with tube watercolors, and even in, you know, a lot of pans, etc., what you see is not usually what you get, especially when the colors are darker. Sometimes they just look like you know, and then you actually add some water it down, it's like oh, you know. So we'll come back to that palette in a minute. So I set that aside. The image I'm going to watercolor is one of the newer ones. This is from the Craft Your Life project kit. This is the Garden Whispers set. This floral, like I said, is big. I loves it. Can't go wrong with large floral stamps. This one stamp in this set is enormous, because I grabbed my little pack of Altenew watercolor paper, and this is a 5 by 7 inch, you know, pre-cut piece. The stamp's too big for it. Love it. Love it. I was fine with that though, because my finished card is going to be A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So I don't need the entire stamp. And I had to like tell myself that, because I almost went and grabbed my bigger pack of Altenew watercolor paper, and I was like, dude, why? you're cutting it down in the end anyway. You know, get over yourself. So I, for once, followed my own advice. And I just stamped it onto the watercolor paper, onto the slightly smoother side. This is cold press watercolor paper. So it does have some texture to it. All cold press watercolor paper, at least quality stuff, has some texture. There's generally, though, a rougher side and a slightly smoother side. So I do make it a habit of choosing whichever side is slightly smoother for stamping on, because it does make it a little bit easier. Because when you're stamping on texture, as I just showed here, I ended up stamping this twice, and I used Altenew's Obsidian Pigment Ink for that. So it's stamped. I did not heat emboss it. I'm getting a little more comfortable again with just watercoloring images without my bumper pads. Like, look at me, I'm growing up. I've talked about this before. I like heat embossing my images because it creates that raised edge, and then I can just slap the color on and go on about my day. But yeah, lately I've decided to just stop doing that and be a little more mindful with my coloring, and so far so good. That doesn't mean the next video I wouldn't, heat emboss and slap color on. It just depends on my mood. So, for my watercoloring, I mixed some colors together there, as you saw on my palette. You can use the colors as is. You can mix them. You can experiment. I was using Phthalo green, which is a pretty bright, like almost acidy green. And so I toned it down with a bit of the red, which I don't know the colors offhand. I've got to look at everything on here. That was Toluidine red. So green and red are opposites, and they are red will tone down green and vice versa. So I added a bit of red to it, and that toned down the green. And then I decided to just have fun and added a bit of the Opera Lemon, which is that neon yellow color. If you like neon colors, Opera Lemon watercolor, it is unbelievably, it is pure neon yellow. Love it. It's fun. So anyway, the actual watercoloring itself, anybody can do this. I kept it simple. Still getting over the rank cold I had not too long ago. It's still lingering a bit, but I'm not as bad. When I was making this, though, and painting this, I was not feeling very good. So this was as far as I could get in terms of coloring. But I genuinely mean it when I say anyone can do this. And an image like this, it's deceptive. Because it's so large, there's a lot of detail going on. There's a lot going on. And it does. It looks like, oh no, this is too difficult. Trust me. This is actually a really good image to try watercoloring with, because everything's in sections, even the leaves. Other than that one at the very bottom that I started with, look how each leaf on here is a different section. So just take it one little section at a time. And I think anybody can do this. Don't forget, though, that because it's part of a Craft Your Life kit, there is layering stencils, which is great. You can always skip the coloring. But like I've always said, I love my layering stencils. Love it. Because just that ink blending is satisfying. But then I'll never give up on watercoloring and coloring with markers and all the things, because it's fun. So anywho, all that to say, regardless of what image, but this one is a good one. It really is. Because do all the greenery, you just do section by section. And then the florals, we're going to do the same thing. So I did all the greenery first. And I was using just my Altenew watercolor brushes. I've been using these. It's been over a year now. I forget when I bought these. It was a year ago, a little over that, something. I like them. And I'm using two brushes. I use one to do, my mixing and picking up color. And then the other brush is what I'm applying water with to each section. Right there. I'm applying water just to the flower center. And then I use the other brush that I mixed up. And I mixed in the yellow. That was, I think, permanent yellow deep. I added a bit of the Opera Lemon. I mixed in some of the green, a little bit of the red to kind of make a bit more of a muddy color for the flower centers. So I applied the water first and then the color. And that just helps it, this is wet on wet, so it just helps it blend out. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. I'm not doing any glazing or layering of, different colors. Most of it was just the mixing of colors, because I was having fun. I like this palette something that's ceramic. If you've ever worked with watercolors, if you use different palettes, they can be annoying sometimes. It just depends on the material. Like some plastics are, it's so annoying. Like everything just beads up on it and doesn't lay how it's supposed to. It's somewhat inconsequential, and at other times it can just be really annoying. And me having 5 million different watercolor supplies and palettes and mixing palettes and all the different things, I really do like ceramic ones. So this one, I was like, ooh, it's nice. Plus, it does have like a lip all around the edge. For me, that's such a good thing. Because I tend to get messy, and spill things and all of that. So I was like, it keeps it a little more contained. So for the florals, I mixed the pink and the purple together. So that was Quinacridone, Magenta, and Quinacridone Violet. And so they ended up being more purple because I like accidentally mushed my brush a little too hard into the purple puddle that I'd made. But you know what? I was okay with that because it's a pretty color. So I painted all the petals with that, and then brightened up my little muddy area just a little bit with that brighter yellow, and painted that right onto the little stamens. And that was it. No other, I'm not going into adding any more layers. Like I said, I wanted to keep this simple. So after I was done, I die cut it with the coordinating wafer die. So ran that through my die cut machine. And now I've got this great big floral that I have watercolored that is going to be the focus of my card, which A2 size, so 4¼ by 5½ inches. So I've got an A2 panel of cardstock, and this is just smooth white cardstock. And I'm going to use one of Altenew's fresh dye inks. This is Minty Mint, so just a very pale minty green. And I'm using one of the small blending brushes. And I just started kind of in the center of this panel in a light hand, because I kind of wanted to create like a glow of this green ink in the center of this panel of cardstock. So I started in the center and just worked my way out, just circular motion, oval motion, really. And once I was happy with it, over it, I used the Squiggly Lines stencil. And then with this, I'm using a much more intense green. It's just green. That's what it's called. Just green, like straight green. And the blending brush and a light hand, because this green is very dark and I don't want it to be dark. I want this background to be pretty soft. And I achieved that, surprisingly, because usually it's like, it just is what it is. But blended that lightly over, so then I've got this neat patterned sort of background going on here. So that created my background. And then I had put some of Simon's Big Mama foam tape on the back of the floral, and then adhered that to the panel. And then I'm going to trim off everything that's hanging over the edges with my scissors. And then once I've got that all shored up, I of course am going to add splatter. So the first bit of splatter, I'm just going to use the watercolor that I had mixed up for the petals. It's dry in my palette. Watercolors can be reactivated with water. Like, I can come back and use this palette over and over and over again. And like I said, until I either just get it so muddy and mucked up that I just want to rinse the whole thing off. But yeah, reactivate it with water and you're good to go. So that's what I did. And then I just splattered that. And for this, I just used my little watercolor brush that I was watercoloring with. And then I pulled out the titanium white watercolor. Now this I wouldn't necessarily actually watercolor with, because when you use white watercolor, there are pigments in it, because that's the only way you can get white. White is not transparent. So if you use white to lighten your colors, you are, in a sense, not so much. It's not as much a watercolor anymore. It's more a gouache, in my opinion. That said, have I done that in the past? Many times. I don't really care. But for me, as I'm getting more and more like knowledgeable, in a sense, with watercolors, I wouldn't necessarily watercolor with this. But am I gonna splatter with it? Oh heck yeah! It makes nice splatter. So I put a little bit on the palette, and for this I use my fan brush because I went a little heavier handed with it, and watered it down a little bit, and then just splattered this onto the background. Could have used my white gouache for this. They're very similar. So yeah. After I did my splattering, I set that aside. and I put my card base into my stamp wheel, and my card base is a top folding A2 white note card, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I lined up that big floral stamp again so that it'll stamp onto the inside of the card. And this I'm going to ink up with a really light purple ink. So this is Soft Lilac Fresh Dye ink from Altenew. So I'm going to ink up this floral. I'm going to stamp that onto the inside of the card. And then once that's stamped, I'm going to take one of the sentiments from the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that with the same Obsidian black ink. So get the floral stamped, so we got the pretty pattern on the inside of the card, and then line up the sentiment. Once it's lined up, I'll pick that up with the lid of the stamp wheel, and then I'll stamp that with the Obsidian ink. And then for the card front, I'm using a sentiment that I die cut from the Timeless Sentiments die set. This is an oldie but goodie that I've used multiple times. So I adhered the card front to the card base with craft tacky glue. And then the die cut sentiment I had die cut from scraps of just white and black cardstock, white for the word and black for the outline. So after I'd had that die cut, I'm going to adhere that into place with just a foam square and a bit more craft tacky glue just to even everything out. So I'll get that adhered into place. And then as my final bit of embellishment, I dug through my my stash of bling, and I had these Amethyst Gem Sparkles, and the middle shade in this little pack went perfectly with the watercolor I had mixed for the petals. So I was like, meant to be. So these are self-adhesive, so you just peel and stick. Love it. So I just peeled those off and stuck a few of them onto this card to finish it off. And that was it. So, yeah, I'm a fan of the Petal Palette. I think it's pretty. Like I said, it's bougie. It's a little too bougie for me, honestly. I'm such a hot mess, but I feel fancy using it, so I consider it a win. Anyway, like I mentioned, I will have links to everything that I used in the description box below the video. I'll link to my Instagram if you want to hop on over there. Just find the picture of this card, and there will be there's a hop, giveaways, all the info, tons of inspiration from amazing designers. Definitely worth checking out. So that'll be in the description box below for anyone who's interested. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.
Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!